We are surrounded by so much information and so many unwritten rules about how we should live, what is considered normal, what we should chase. But after a while, I noticed that trying to keep up with all of it wasn't helping me. And that's when I realized the real shift in understanding myself isn't about learning more. It's more about unlearning. So instead of constantly trying to explain who I am, I've been gently questioning who I was told to be and why. Not in some tinfoil hat conspiracy way, but in a way that clears out the noise and helps me see who I actually am. So in this video, I want to share 7 social rules I have unlearned and how letting go of them has made my life a lot lighter. The first one is the progress rule. I think one of the strongest rules we pick up without realizing is this idea that life should be always moving forward. Every year is supposed to look better than the last. More income, more achievements, more upgrades. You get a job, you move up, then you're supposed to become a manager. In relationships, it's the same script. When are you moving in? When are you getting engaged? When are you getting married and having kids? Staying in the same place is seen as a failure. A decline isn't even worth mentioning. It's like eternal growth and progress is the bare minimum. But what it actually creates is this constant dissatisfaction. You don't really celebrate achievements. You just downgrade them as a step. The moment you reach one thing, the next thing is already waiting. And if you feel content, there's this little guilt like maybe you have given up. Maybe you have now settled, maybe you have lost your ambition in life. I remember catching myself asking, like, when does this then end? Like, what's then the maximum level? When can I finally say I am satisfied? And the truth is, it never ends unless you decide it does. On YouTube, for example, here on this platform, I've been thinking, how many subscribers is enough? 10,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million. When can I say that I don't need more? I am now content. There's no actual number. It is my choice to say that this is enough, like whatever that number is. So for me, the shift has been trying to be more intentional, to ask where do I really want to grow and where am I already satisfied? Because progress doesn't always mean that you have to have more. Sometimes it means going deeper into what you already have, or sometimes a season where nothing new happens ends actually up being like the richest season of your life because you, for example, realize something because of that. So now take a second and ask yourself, do you actually want the next step, or are you only going after it because you think you should? The second rule is the label rule. We grow up being told it's important to know who you are. And on the surface, this sounds like a great idea. But usually what it ends up meaning is pick a box, pick a label, and then stay in it. It's this either or way of thinking. You are supposed to be introverted or extroverted, creative or logical, ambitious or simple. And if you try to be a mix or you don't have a clear answer for who you are, it feels like you are doing something wrong because all the other people in the world know exactly what they are, to which box they belong to. It even shows up in identity stuff, like you are the athlete, you are the artist, or the mom, or the minimalist. Once you have chosen like a word, it's like people expect you to live up to it forever, and you start expecting that from yourself as well. The problem is, forcing yourself into a neat definition doesn't actually make life easier. You start worrying about whether you are proving your label enough. And if you change careers or hobbies or even parts of your personality, you feel like you have now broken some unspoken contract. I have noticed that labels can sometimes be useful. They give us language to connect with others, and they can make you feel less alone when you find a community around them. But they can also become cages. And I realized I had built way too many of those cages for myself while I was trying to be the best version of me. Someone who's always calm, someone who's always productive, ambitious, someone who always has answers. What feels better now is to treat labels like tools instead of identities. They can describe a season of life, but they don't need to define every part of it. So take some time and reflect on what labels have you given yourself that are keeping you stuck. Then we have the happiness rule. One of the biggest unwritten rules in our culture when it comes to social life is that you should always look like you are doing fine. Always smiling, always upbeat, always together, in public. You're supposed to look composed and maybe successful. And when you are tired, stressed, or angry, you are expected to push it all down because those emotions belong only to very private settings. When we all act like this, what ends up happening is that life starts to feel like a performance, kind of like that Black Mirror episode, if you have been watching that series, where everyone had to score each other, give like a rating to each other based on how they looked or acted. You put on this front that says everything is okay, even when it's not, and the cost is very high. Nobody will see the real you, the true you, who you actually are. And sometimes you even stop seeing yourself because you're so used to saying that you are fine or having this sort of front. It creates shame around natural emotions like sadness or frustration, and instead of letting them pass, you just focus on like fixing yourself, which can be really exhausting and it can burn you out. So on my journey, what I have learned is that emotions aren't good or bad. They're just signals. If I feel happy, that probably means something in my life is aligned. If I feel stressed or angry or drained, there's probably a reason for that too. Maybe I need to change something. Maybe I just need to rest. Composure in social settings can be useful. Otherwise social life would be pretty chaotic like a jungle, but pretending all the time takes the life out of life. The alternative, at least for me, has been to stop fighting every negative feeling. If you're having a bad day, just have a bad day. It doesn't mean that you have to be rude to others, but it just means allowing that feeling, allowing that day to be then bad. Sometimes sharing that honestly with someone actually makes the connection even stronger between you two. And I have noticed that people usually want these days like real conversations, not this endless small talk. So think about this. What part of yourself do you hide the most just to look fine? The fourth rule is the degree rule. And yeah, I had to come back inside because I ran out of battery. This is the idea that success equals formal education. You finish high school and then you are supposed to go to university, to a college, do a master's degree, maybe a PhD, because without a degree, people assume you are less smart or less capable, and the degree itself gets treated like proof of your worth, even in areas where it doesn't actually matter. This way of thinking then also shapes how we think about work. The good jobs are the ones that come with diplomas, offices, suits, and big salaries, and the bad jobs are seen as manual work, service jobs, or anything without a high salary. Our society values the marketing director of a fashion company with a master's degree more than the mechanic who keeps our vehicles safe on the road and helps prevent accidents. But if you ask which one is actually more valuable, you already know the answer. What this creates is a lot of pressure. Young people end up studying things they don't really care about just to have a degree, People choose jobs for status instead of their interests. And if you never went to university or college like me, there can be this quiet shame that follows you around, even if you're doing completely fine without the degree. I never went there myself, partly because I never found something I wanted to commit 3 to 5 years of study to, and over time I realized that most of what I have learned has come through self-education and actually doing things anyway. I also noticed many people I know got a degree, and then ended up in completely different fields where that degree wasn't even needed. So I started to see that I didn't need a piece of paper or anything like this to be happy or to build a career. Of course, for some paths, doctors, engineers, teachers, the formal education is essential. I'm not going to a doctor myself who learned how to do surgeries in their own bathroom, but not every career needs that track. If I'm hiring, for example, a video editor to edit these videos, I don't care which school they went to. I care about how good they are in that actual task. So stepping outside the rule didn't close doors for me. It opened them. I would actually argue that the value I bring here, making videos that reach thousands of people, is much higher than if I worked as a researcher for some cool brand. Even if on paper I am, just a YouTuber. So maybe ask yourself, if your degree or lack of one disappeared tomorrow, what would you believe about your own worth? Then we have the gender rule. This is an important one to simplify things in life. When you really stop and look at it, so many things in life are split by gender, at least in our minds. Certain careers are quietly seen as male or female. At home, tasks get divided the same way. Even hobbies end up carrying these certain labels. But what that creates is limitation. People holding back from jobs or hobbies they would enjoy just because they don't match that label. You end up avoiding things you are naturally drawn to, not because you don't like them, but because of how it might look in the eyes of other people. I know this is not anything new, and it has been a topic for years now, probably decades, not centuries, but decades at least. But at some point I started asking myself too, could I just stop asking, is this for men or is this for women? And start asking, do I want this or do I need this? And I realized I could. Who is stopping me? Nobody. And that simplified my life a lot. If you think about it, anything can be anyone's job. Cooking, fixing, earning, cleaning, they are not gender roles. They are just basic life skills, in my opinion. Of course, there are personal preferences, but I think it's actually dangerous if we pretend otherwise. I read in a book once that if you want to be a role model for your son, but cannot show him physical love because you think it's not masculine, then you're not actually being a good role model. And if a woman doesn't know how to change a light bulb because she thinks she's too feminine for that, that is not femininity. That is missing a very practical and normal life skill. Think about it in your own life. If gender expectations disappeared tomorrow, what would you finally allow yourself to try? The politeness rule. There's a social rule most of us learn early, and it's different from the idea of always looking happy or composed. This one is about being agreeable. Don't cause conflict. Don't make other people feel uncomfortable. It's why so many of us find it hard to say no, because we don't want to disappoint someone, or why we stay neutral in groups and swallow our opinions. At work, it shows up as never confronting your boss, even if something is really unfair. In families, it's not questioning old traditions, even when they mentally drain you. On the surface, it looks harmless. You are keeping the peace. But the truth is that conflict doesn't disappear. It just goes inward. You end up pleasing people at the cost of yourself. I realized at some point that avoiding conflict doesn't protect peace. In the long term, it destroys it. Politeness, of course, has its place, kindness matters, respect to one another matters, but not when they mean sacrificing your own peace. And sometimes what looks like conflict on the surface is actually a gift. When you tell the truth or push back, it gives other people a chance to see themselves and maybe even grow because of that situation, because of your reaction. If you never say anything, they just keep doing what they are doing. So try to say no clearly when you need to. choose honesty over being endlessly agreeable, allow discomfort in conversation if that is needed in your opinion, and I think you'll find that people will respect you more for being clear and real than for being all the time just polite. So here's a question for you. What are you protecting by staying agreeable? And what is it costing you? The seventh rule is the busyness rule. The degree rule is about the type of work you choose, and this one is about how that work should be done. I feel like these days creative work, having flexible schedules or part-time jobs aren't seen as serious. A real job means long hours and a set schedule, even if it's actually more about how many hours you spend at work, not what actually comes out of it. Cal Newport, the author, even has a phrase for it in his book Slow Productivity, and that is pseudo-productivity. Basically, looking busy instead of actually doing meaningful work, because that is the most important thing. If your schedule looks different from the busy, at least 9 to 5, and you are not tired from your work, people think there's something wrong or you are just not working enough. What this mentality creates then is guilt, and it's a big part of why burnout is so common these days. In my opinion, a much better way would be to value results and meaning over the hours spent at your desk. If you finish something half the time, that's great. It means you did a good job. Now enjoy the rest of your day without needing to prove that you are the highest achiever at your workplace or that you know. Because your worth has nothing to do with how exhausted you are. So reflect on, are you measuring your worth by how busy you look or by what your life actually feels like? For more food for thought, check out this video next. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to stay kind and meaningful in your own beautiful journey. See you in the next one.